Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever your time zone. Welcome. This is Digital Transformation Talk, and I am your host, Kevin Crane. Welcome to the show. Today, we are here today to talk about aligning digital transformation to sustainability. Aligning digital transformation with sustainability is really important for several reasons. Of course, first is the environmental impact. Digital transformation involves the use of technology and data centers that consume energy. By aligning digital transformation initiatives with sustainability goals, our organizations can focus on making a difference by using renewable energy sources or optimizing our energy consumption and reducing our carbon footprints. This is great for the environment, but all of this is good for the organization as well in terms of resource efficiency and savings. Sustainability-driven digital transformation encourages the efficient use of resources like raw materials and water and energy. This can lead to cost savings, reduced waste, and a more sustainable supply chain. Another big factor to consider is regulatory compliance. Many countries and regions around the world have regulations and standards related to sustainability and environmental protection. Aligning digital transformation with these sustainability goals helps us comply with these regulations, avoid penalties, and maintain a positive reputation in the marketplace. There are other factors to consider. Innovation and differentiation, for example. Sustainability-focused digital transformation drives innovation and can create new market opportunities, helping us to differentiate our business from our competitors and foster sustainable growth. All of this adds to better long-term viability and resilience and happier stakeholders and customers and investors. So, integrating sustainability into digital transformation is essential for both the planet and our organization. But how do you do it? That's what we'll be exploring today with a great panel of guests. What transformation tools are available to aid in data-driven sustainability improvements, ways to cultivate a company-wide culture to promote sustainable transformation, and steps to take to start your sustainable DX journey. So stay tuned for a great session today. But before I introduce our guests, I do want to say, as always, that we want to hear from you too. We'd like to encourage everyone attending today to participate. So please join in with your comments in the chat section. And if you have a question along the way, please jump in. I will attempt to get some of your questions into the flow of the show, and we'll have a few minutes also at the end for your questions. All right, let's bring aboard our guests today, starting with Patrick Strauss. Patrick is Chief Intelligent Environments Solutions Officer at Global Logic. Patrick, welcome aboard. Patrick has over 30 years of professional experience in supply chain and with a specific focus on implementing digital transformation. He's worked in manufacturing and retail, as well as supply chain and logistics. Look, Patrick has been with us here just recently on the show, and you may know that and remember from last time that Patrick is one of the folks that worked on a team developing the first human cyborg. Welcome back, Patrick. Thank you so much for joining us again today.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And it's a real great pleasure to come back again. So yes, I'm looking forward to this particular session today.
Thank you, Patrick. All right, welcome aboard. Also with us today is Asif Din, Sustainability Director at Perkins & Will. Asif, please come on and join us. Asif is in charge of regenerative design at Perkins & Will, and he has to keep an eye on 100 designers to make sure they're embracing and following environmental policies. But look, a little known fact about Asif is that you're a frustrated musician with a range of abandoned instruments at home. Asif, what's your latest abandoned instrument?
I've got a ukulele gathering dust at the moment.
A ukulele. All right.
Yeah.
Well, look, if things get really bad, we'll have you pull that out, and that'll take care of it. All right.
Okay.
All right. Welcome aboard, Asif. Thank you so much. And finally today, Mark Riesig. Mark is an executive consultant and sustainability and green energy practice director at CIM Data. Mark, welcome aboard. You have over 40 years of experience helping large industrial companies and solutions providers. But listen, your interest in sustainability started way back in high school when you were a surfer and you realized the ocean would absorb more carbon than land, then causing glaciers and polar caps to melt. Wow, that's quite a realization for a surfer back in high school.
Yeah, I've just taken an oceanography class, and I wanted to know from my brighter colleagues if they could do the math, and did I really need to study for finals, or was this going to take a little longer? So
all right,
apparently it was
Mark.
going to
Well,
take a
I'm
little
sure
longer.
I'm sure that perspective and heartfelt perspective will be helpful today. So, gentlemen, welcome aboard. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to start us off by drawing our attention to an article published recently by Tech Radar titled The Past, Present, and Future of Sustainable Digital Infrastructure. The article primarily focuses heavily on data center operations. My background is in data center operations. So I was intrigued to have the article ask the question of whether or not data centers are maybe an Achilles heel of sustainability, or if indeed they can be a catalyst for sustainable change. It's an interesting question. Look, it's no secret that the amount of data power that we use is rapidly growing, along with the amount of data that we use and create every day, which is just getting bigger. As a result, this increased power consumption can call into question the idea of a green data center. And with sustainability now a key priority for all major organizations, it becomes an important organizational conundrum for enterprises. And on a macro scale, it brings up a much broader issue of digital transformation and sustainability. How can we claim to be green when we eat up all this electrical power? So my question to the group is digital transformation even a viable contributor to sustainability, or is it actually a foe to sustainability? How can digital transformation and sustainability coexist strategically and conceptually? Patrick, what are your thoughts on this? I know when we spoke earlier, you had a thought of data to energy and the equation there. Tell me more.
I think it's all about the right balance. And I think we can't deal with digital transformation or with sustainability without the need for data and the clarity around the data. So it kind of all goes hand in hand. And I think what we need to find is that right balance. But I think what we need to kind of really understand is it's not just the data that we create. And you're absolutely right. The data is kind of exponentially kind of growing year on year, day by day, hour by hour. And obviously that facilitates the need to have the necessary infrastructure to deal with that kind of data explosion. So is it kind of an Achilles heel? Is it kind of, enabler? I think it's a little bit of both. And I think kind of those that kind of run those kind of data centers, those that kind of really kind of host the data in the cloud, need to kind of be aware in terms of how can I contribute towards the sustainability angle? Because let's be really, really clear on two facts. The first one is you can't ignore not doing digital transformation, full stop. You can also not ignore to do sustainability activities to kind of drive towards a much greener, healthier, safer planet. So these are two very, very important paradigms that we just can't ignore nowadays. And that's a full stop. So the question that we need to ask is, how do we create that right balance? And there is no silver bullet answer. And obviously, I would like to hear the other colleagues on this call as well. Maybe there is a silver bullet, but I don't think there is.
Well, Asif, when we talked about this earlier today, or yesterday, I guess it was, you mentioned the idea of creating lean digital processes. What do you mean by that?
At the moment, we're actually seeing digital infrastructure as an infinite resource, essentially. And it is not that it's, we have to be constrained and say it's finite. That'd be going too far, but it is still a resource. And in the same way that we deal with energy within buildings, we look to minimize the actual energy use within buildings. In the same way that we should be actually looking at what data do we actually need? What data do we actually use for information? And effectively, what we're going to with Internet of Things at the moment is sensors everywhere and lots of data everywhere, the majority of which will not be used. And that, in terms of a data center, is wasted resource.
And Mark, you're an expert in sustainability and green energy practice, so I'm interested to hear your perspective on this bigger question of digital transformation and sustainability. Can they coexist? In other words, how can we be green when we consume so much energy?
So they absolutely can. And if you take a look at kind of a macro look at the typical hyperscaler, what they care about are computing power and the energy they use. Those are their two biggest costs. So the first is it's really a graphic processing unit, or a GPU. And if you look recently at NVIDIA's Blackwell that they just came out with, you can process the amount of data 4 times faster than you could before. In other words, it'll be more efficient. So over time, while this article brings up a lot of great points, AI is going to continue to grow. Data is going to continue to grow, but the computing power is actually going to use less energy. On top of that, hyperscalers in general, it's probably the second easiest way to reduce emissions for a major corporation. The first is where you get your electric, and you can sign an agreement that says, hey, I want all renewable energy. The second one is pressure on the data centers that use only renewable energy. So they're driving renewable energy. And the other point, Asif, well, both the gentlemen made great points about the actual data. But AI is going to help drive efficiencies in how we use data in things like grid, building energy, consumption, use,
I see.
many other things, right? So while it brings up some good points, and in particular, like, what are they going to do with the water part of it? I don't know, right? So that part actually concerns me, but it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? AI is going to help us out of...
Yeah, it is an interesting conundrum, and one that I'm glad that we're exploring today, because I think we forget both sides of those coins. We're either looking at the sustainability somewhat isolated, or digital transformation somewhat isolated, and I am enjoying the idea of exploring the confluence of those two things. So if you are interested in reading that article, there is a link here in the chat section to the article from Tech Radar, the past, present, and future of sustainable digital infrastructure. Take a look there and let us know what you think in the comments. We'd like to hear what you have to say about this topic. Well, all right, gentlemen, let's move on to our discussion points for today. And the first being transformation tools to aid in data-driven sustainability improvements. All right, so look, my big question is, what tools are making a difference? Are there recommendations of tools and approaches that we should be using in our digital transformation strategies that can help us meet our sustainability goals as an organization? Asif, I'm going to say Asif every time. I'm sorry, Asif.
It's fine.
Asif, do you have any recommendations for us?
I know what it looks like, but I haven't got any recommendations as yet, to be quite honest. At the moment, within the built, sort of like, I deal with architecture, the built environment field, and within architecture and the built environment field, there is a lot of data that needs to be collected and needs to be aggregated and needs to be available to designers at an early stage. I know what it is, but in matter of fact, the solutions that are out there are piecemeal, and there's no one integrator that will actually do that digital transformation that we desperately need within the built environment field.
And what kinds of data are essential today? I think, if I'm getting back to perhaps Mark's point, is that it's sort of like gas mileage. I mean, early cars didn't get as good a gas mileage. Today, now we have cars that have higher gas mileage. We have hybrid cars. We have indeed, electric cars that eliminate fossil fuels altogether. So it's this idea of data efficiency, perhaps, that is an important one in this equation. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, before, and we were talking about sort of like 20 years ago, it was all about operational efficiency. So it's effectively trying to drive down the amount of energy that your building actually uses. We've moved on from that stage now, because in matter of fact, the embodied carbon, the actual carbon that goes into a building, is equally important. So with that, we need so much more data. So a building could be around about 1,000, 1,500 components different materials. Each one of those needs a full ingredient list so that we fully understand how it's produced, how it's going to operate, and how it's going to be disposed of. That is a lot of data and a lot of research that designers need to do. And in matter of fact, what we need is an efficient way of actually presenting that data at the right point in the design process.
All right. All right.
Excellent.
Now,
Can I
Mark,
jump
what
in?
is your take on this? What tools and approaches do you recommend for change agents putting together digital transformation strategies and linking them to sustainability goals?
Yeah, so it's incredibly important, as Asif said, to give the designer visibility into the embodied carbon or the carbon product footprint. So the actual products that an industrial, what automotive, aerospace, or whatever industry, what they make. There is for a particular material, they'll have something called a CO2e, or a carbon dioxide equivalent, and other sustainability attributes. 10 years ago, nobody had them. When I managed designers, you didn't have that ability to actually see. I could choose one part or another, and you could make choices where you want something manufactured or where you want to buy a material. If you have visibility into that carbon footprint, that's a game changer, because that, along with the supply chain, which has about 80% of the carbon in that product, if you have visibility into that as well throughout the product life cycle, you can dramatically reduce, because you'll be looking at different options, and over time you'll dramatically reduce the embodied carbon. And you can do the same thing with waste, where you're working in a more circular fashion, and that gets a bit more complex in terms of, what kind of model do I have? Do I just produce the product, or do I have a product as a service, as an example? Like Michelin they won't sell, but they'll provide fleets of tires, and they have digital twins of those tires, so they keep track of the air pressure, and they're responsible for it. And when it's done, they have to figure out how to recycle it. So it's that visibility across the life cycle, and those tools, which at this point are not as mature as you would like, but as Steve alluded to, but they are maturing. So,
yes. And Patrick, do you agree? Where do you come on? What are your recommendations? What are some tools and approaches that you believe are making a difference?
So let's be honest here. There's plenty of tools out there: Internet of Things, AI, Gen AI, blockchain, you name it. There's lots of tools out there that people can deploy and look at and utilize to drive a much more data-driven, sustainable transformation. But let me answer it in a slightly different way and come back to something that Asif actually mentioned when we talked about the news article, because he's made a very, very valid point. And I think that's really, really important, I think, for all of us to understand. 99% of data that is being generated, and it doesn't mean if it's just in supply chain or for building management or whatever the situation, 99% of the data becomes pretty much obsolete the moment it's being created and generated, which means a very small percentage of the data is actually really necessary to drive data-driven centric decisions. And I think this is where we need to focus on, really, to kind of drive, how do I get to that kind of 1% data that matters to me and my organization? And this could, for instance, require tools such as IoT, bearing in mind that all these sensors obviously generate abundance of data day in, day out. But it's kind of finding that sweet spot of the data that drives my decisions around how do I drive a better sustainability for my organizations. So that 1% is really critical, because I think that will then drive, coming back to our original article, to kind of how do I probably manage my digital infrastructure and the data centers in a much more sustainable way. So, and there are tools around there. We talk about edge computing, we talk about AI, Gen AI, kind of all the things that kind of really try to eliminate the majority of data that isn't really relevant to me or to my organizations or to make decisions.
Very good. We are here today with Patrick Strauss, Asif Din, and Mark Riesig. We're talking about linking digital transformation to sustainability. If you have a question or a comment for our guests, please jump into the chat feature. And indeed, today we are giving away a very highly functional and very stylish digital transformation coffee mug to the one intrepid visitor today that provides us with the most compelling question or comment. So get your mug by just participating in the discussion. We want to hear what you have to say and what you think about this whole idea of digital transformation and sustainability. How do we measure it? How do we link it together? Is it even possible for the two to coexist both strategically and conceptually? All right, gentlemen, let's move along to our discussion point number 2. And look, as we know with digital transformation or any change initiative, whether that's sustainability or digital transformation or what have you, it is critical that we have a company-wide culture to embrace that approach or that strategy. So I'd like to ask you about cultivating a company-wide culture to promote sustainable digital transformation. My questions to the group is, how do we communicate the importance of sustainability in our digital transformation initiatives? Most of our focus is on the process improvement part of it or the actual technological part of it. But what about the communication to the folks that are in the organization and this linkage to culture? Asif, do you have a perspective or some thoughts on that for us?
Effectively, digital is part of what we do in terms of design. We do not design on drawing boards anymore. We don't have, sort of like pens and sketching. It's effectively all done effectively on computer. So in that sense, most of the built environment design process is digital. Now, the most important thing that I do effectively within the practice is try to explain to people what their impact actually is. What is their remit? How much impact can they actually make overall? Like, sort of like doing just very, very basic studies shows that effectively a designer could live their whole life as a vegan, and yet 1 year as designing buildings is effectively the same amount of impact. Those sorts of
that's
aspects,
really interesting. That gets down to my human sort of feeling about sustainability. I mean, it's not only what I do as a person, but it's what I do at work, but it's also what I do as a person as well. That's an interesting linkage.
Absolutely.
All right, and Patrick, your take on this. I mean, how can we build this company-wide culture and understanding about my personal role in sustainability and my role in a change agent when it comes to digital transformation and how it links to sustainability for the organization and indeed the environment or the world as a whole? What's your take on cultivating this kind of culture and acumen among my organization?
I think culture in itself is a very, very important, relevant question when it comes to digital transformation and sustainability more so. What I've observed on numerous occasions with clients, they kind of see sustainability more as a me too, or I need to do it as well because everybody else does it, but they don't know how to do it really well. And I think there's a couple of steps that I've seen actually works really well. And first and foremost, it has to come from the top. If the top is not bought in, and I would say not many companies nowadays aren't bought into that, then you don't stand a chance on really being successful in your sustainability journey. So from the top. But also what is very, very important as well is to kind of really understand the why. Why do we actually need to be sustainable? And the answer should not be, well, because my competitor down the road is doing it, so hence we have to do it as well. And trust me, I've heard it and seen many times in that kind of line of arguments. That is wrong. What is kind of really kind of understanding is kind of where do we want to be? And there is something that is really important as well to kind of understand. In the sort of 1920s, the lifespan of an organization was estimated to be about 67 years. Today, 100 years later, the expectations or the lifespan of a company is around about 10 to 15 years. So what does that mean, Kevin? It means something very simple and profound. Every organization, no matter which industry you're in where you sit globally on the planet, you need to reinvent your business within the next 10, 15 years. Digital transformation is going to be one of those enablers, but so very much is sustainability, because it is a very hot topic, which means you need to understand where your organization needs to be probably in about 10, 15 years' time. And a lot of organizations are struggling with that long-term vision to say, where do we need to go? And my advice is, where do you see yourself in the customer experience? So customer experience becomes a very vital component when you start communicating from the top, and the reasons why sustainability and how the culture, our culture, needs to change and adapt over not just the next 6 to 12 months, but key also is the continuous journey around sustainability. This is not a short-term project or program. And again, I've seen it many times that people come in with that mindset of, let's do it for the next 12 months. Now, it has to go well beyond the 12 months, because you don't know when the end point is.
All right, very good. Now, Mark, I have a question for you. I'm a big believer in the old adage, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So my question to you, Mark, is how can we measure and link sustainability with digital transformation? Are there specific measures and metrics that I should be looking at?
Yeah, so every program that's going to be successful, you are laying out KPIs that you're going to meet and report out on. And a company that that does this well is going to be very transparent about it. They're going to invest in education. They're going to invest in giving their people the tools, everything that they need to be able to achieve this. And kind of adding on to what Patrick said, this is a kind of a dramatic change, because you're at a high level, we're not making cars the same way. We're not making any products the same way where we can just mine, make, throw it out, right? It has to be in a more circular fashion where we're reusing things, refurbishing things. If you make a wind turbine, which I was in that industry for a while, instead of the blades lasting 10 years or 15 years, or in solar panels, gluing them together so you'd have to practically melt them and create all sorts of toxic stuff. Now you have to make things that are more serviceable, that'll last forever. And do you really want to sell it? Or do you want to own it and just provide the service to your customers, right? Well, your employees, regardless of what you're deciding, and this will likely change, right? What you do in the next 5 years versus the next 10 years, they need to know that why, right? And the KPIs that are measuring along the way need to be very clear, and it needs to be very open and transparent to the whole company, because oftentimes it's the people that now have access to more data that are, getting better at it. They're coming up with better ideas on how to transform the actual company.
Right. So
top-down leadership is good for saying this is a priority. We're not going to survive unless we change. But it's the people meeting those KPIs, exceeding them, and coming up with the better ideas, having that ongoing roadmap.
All right, we are here today with Mark Riesig, Sif Din, and Patrick Strauss. We are here talking about digital transformation and sustainability, linking the two together, and strategies to boost sustainability with our digital transformation plans. Again, if you have a question or comment for our group, please jump into the chat feature. And indeed, gentlemen, we have a question here from Boris. Boris, thank you for your contribution here today. Boris asks, how can companies handle data for sustainability projects while also protecting privacy? Patrick, did you have a comment on that?
Send a message back to Boris, because it very much depends on what data we're referring to. I mean, if it is very confidential data, clearly there is some data privacy and security concerns around that one. But I would say we always have to remember there are sustainability reporting frameworks out there, such as ESG and others. And they obviously kind of look at data that are meant to be published and kind of will be published for public consumption in that sense. So finding that right balance of what data is kind of very company specific versus those that kind of, I'm kind of destined to actually use for public consumption is again a balancing act, similar to what we said at the beginning. But if they're kind of specific data that Boris had in mind, I'd be keen to sort of kind of hear that as well.
All right, very good. All right, let's move along to our third discussion point, and that is steps to start your sustainable digital transformation journey. Look, for our listeners that may be just starting out with digital transformation, or maybe just starting to reframe their digital transformation strategies and approaches with an eye or a framework around sustainability, what steps do you recommend? What are the parts of a formal proposal that I should be including when it comes to sustainability? And what steps do you recommend for moving forward? Asif, do you have some suggestions for us?
Well, it's deciding what your responsibility is in this field. So finding out what your remit is, and then having the transparency of that data and then measure against it. Sort of like you can't, sort of like say whether you're improving unless you have benchmark data or some description. So it's trying to find that benchmark data in a robust manner and then being transparent with that information and reporting back on that and seeing what direction of travel you're going in.
All right. So again, Asif, you're I'm hearing a consistent theme here about really you've got to know your data and know the importance and variability of that data in terms of all of your plans for all of this.
Yeah, I think it's not that you know your data, but it's about the transparency. It's about being honest. Sort of like we are seeing quite a lot in the sustainability field about offshoring. Effectively, it's not my responsibility, it's somebody else's. If you can ring fence effectively what is your responsibility and report on that consistently, then effectively you have got a robust argument and a robust way of reporting.
All right. And Mark, all right, what parts of a formal proposal or plan must I include in my strategy with respect to sustainability?
So you want to list out the main obstacles, what you're trying to achieve. And there may be actually a lack of data and a lack of, and probably a major change in the processes with how you did things in the past and how you'll likely have to transform in the future. Just to use one simple example, supply chains are where 80% of the embodied carbon are located. So how you deal with them, maybe it was sourcing, send them an email, you'd get stuff back, that's not the type of transparency that you need, right? You need to be able to see what are your options. Do I have strategic relationships with them where I can see the carbon equivalents and the materials that vendor A and vendor B are giving me? Can I do something where I'm not doing one-offs all the time? I just have a long strategic relationship with them, partnering with companies, but there are multiple answers. But the main thing is have a clear understanding of what your problem is and potentially benchmarked against your competitors and your sustainability goals, right? So.
And Patrick, you're an environmental solutions expert. What parts of a formal proposal must I include in my plan? And can you give me an example of one organization or use case that you feel has been particularly successful? What did they do and what were the results?
Can't give you a specific name simply because I'm under NDA with some of the clients that I work with, but I would say it's getting consistently better for people and for organizations to understand what is important to report. And I'd like to draw your attention actually on the chat, because Boris actually very kindly responded to my question about what data specifically refers to. And he talks about various data types such as energy consumption, carbon emissions, waste generation, etc., etc. Now, I would say all of these are in some shape or form relevant when it comes, for instance, to report against your ESG sustainability credentials. There are very specific kind of points and the way it's kind of laid out in terms of how the information has to be presented in that sense. And I would say these frameworks have been around for some time and are very well utilized nowadays by many organizations. So you can actually start really comparing apples with apples, which is kind of the whole point to kind of what Asif kind of said earlier. It's about the honesty and transparency. Yes, still organizations are trying to hide around, some of the, let's say, shortcomings of maybe being or becoming green. But the point really of sustainability is not to kind of say, hey, you're bad, you're not green, hence, I don't want to do business with you. It should be really kind of quite the opposite. It kind of should allow an organization to demonstrate where your organization currently needs improvements to become greener, to become much more kind of eligible, to kind of say, we are an organization where we want our customers to come back over and over again because they realize we are kind of driving towards a much more greener, sustainable planet. And I think this is kind of where it goes. It is the customer experience ultimately. So does it really matter if I kind of go into nth degree of detail of kind of how much water, how much energy I consume? Yes, it is important for me as an organization to know all that information so I can drive better decisions to do better. But from a customer perspective, it means probably very little. What they're looking for is kind of, show and prove to me that this trainer, that these sweatshirt, these kind of jeans that you create are actually kind of sustainable and come from places where you, company X, company Y, company Z, that you actually drive a strong positive impact on the planet. And I think what we're seeing is more and more evidence for companies to go through various rigorous assessment programs, such as B Corp, for instance, kind of very, very prestigious kind of awards and labels that companies kind of only achieve when they really can truly demonstrate that transparency and how they deal with data. So again, to the point that I've made a couple of times, it becomes a balance. And yes, there is certain data probably that isn't necessarily right for consumption for a wider audience, but you need to kind of find that right balance to say, what is it that you report and make sure that this data is accurate to the best possible one.
All right, everyone, you are with us here at Digital Transformation Talk. We're here with Patrick Strauss, Chief Intelligent Environment Solutions Officer at Global Logic, Asif Din, Sustainability Director at Perkins & Will, and Mark Riesig, Executive Consultant and Sustainability and Green Energy Practice Director at CIM Data. We'd like to thank Boris for his contributions today. Boris, I believe that you are the recipient of this one, not this particular mug, this is mine, but a mug very much like this, Digital Transformation mug. Thank you for your contributions today, Boris. We really do appreciate it. All right, gentlemen, before our time is up, we have reached the action round of the program. For each of you, I wonder if you might provide us with one quick action item that we can use to take advantage of your ideas and advice today. Mark, do you have an action item for us?
Yeah, I would say if you are not familiar with the phrase design for sustainability or eco-design, brush up on it, because 80% of the mistakes we make in embodied carbon are done very early in the life cycle or a concept stage of any product. And the way historically we traditionally went about it, nobody gave this a second thought. And today, the main point is when you design new products, you're designing with the end of life in mind, how these materials will be refurbished, recycled, put back into the ground, etc. That's the way moving forward. That is not the way 50, 60-year-old engineers ever were trained or thought, right? So it's a whole new mindset. And I think people need to start getting up to speed on it.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Very good. All right. Asif, what is your action item for us today?
Know where things come from and where they end up. To know effectively what they are in terms of their life cycle. Like at the start of the program, we actually started talking about data centers. I don't think many people actually know what a data center is, what it looks like. Effectively, sort of like how many people have visited, say, a sewage works and know where their water comes from. I think it's important as designers that we know where things start up and what is the disposal process, or how do we make things circular at the end of life.
All right. That is Asif Din. Thank you, Asif. And finally, Patrick. Patrick, do you have an action item for us today?
I do know it basically one action item is 3 questions. So if I would come to your organization tomorrow, I would like you to answer the following. Where do you think your organization needs to be in 5 to 10 years' time? What is your customer experience? And why is it important to you? Give me an answer to those 3 questions, and you're kind of a good step forward in terms of digital transformation and sustainability.
All right, very good. Patrick, Asif, Mark, thank you so much for being with us today. Your perspective and advice were spot on. Thank you so much. I hope that we get a chance to talk again soon. And to everyone joining us today, thank you too. Join us again next time, April 9th at 1600 GMT, with another great panel of guests. We'll be discussing how the right data could help supercharge your business transformation. Sounds like another great discussion that right on the heels of this one today. So look forward to that. And if you'd like to find me, you can do so on LinkedIn. I am happy to connect there. You can check me out. I'm Kevin Crane. And check out my weekly audio podcast, the Digital Transformation Podcast. But for now, that'll do it for this episode of Digital Transformation Talk. And until next time, I'm Kevin Crane. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.